Hi, I'm Brett. This is a video update in our series of information on our R&D for the current model, that is the MY15 Subaru WRX. Now this is the new direct injection turbo 2-litre engine, which has been recently released here in Australia only in the last month. We've got the car on the hoist. We've already begun a lot of our R&D with ECU tuning. We've spoken about brakes. Well, today I'm going to give you some updates on what they've changed with the exhaust system. And there's a lot that is similar, but there's also a lot at the front that makes it very complicated. In some ways, it's very similar at the front to the current model Liberty GT that come out around 2010. But in the rear half of the exhaust, very similar to previous models with a lot of parts that are very similar in fitting. So as we all know now, the rear muffler is a quad outlet. Subaru has made a bit of a change with the tips now pointing a bit further out the back of the bumper bar, whereas the previous model they were recessed back in. The cans on the back end, I get my camera to come around, they've changed the connection of the flange here, which now has got a different gasket in here, which is going to make it a little bit more complicated with the aftermarket industry, but typically twin outlets on the back, very similar to the STI that's come out. The single piece Y pipe now goes all the way to the front with a resonator in the middle. The flexible joint is actually a lot further back. Now this part here is very, very important. A lot of aftermarket exhaust systems leave this part out, but if I move that far enough, you can see that's actually a ball joint with spring-loaded springs to keep it tight together. It's very, very important to insulate the back half of the exhaust system, which is hanging on the body, the front half of the exhaust, which is attached to the transmission and the engine. So when the engine moves, this is where the differential in that movement between the body and the engine is all taken up. Resonator in here, this is not a cat converter, but we go right forward here around the side of the transmission. Our car's got the 6-speed transmission, not the CVT, into the secondary cat, because this is at the back, remember. And then what is different now goes around the side and into the turbo. Now you've got to remember, on the previous EJ20 and EJ25s, the whole turbo and manifold were all up here, and this exhaust used to go around the side here. And I'll just get my cameraman, you'll see there's almost this huge hole here left now where there's no turbo up here anymore. But the turbo is now this assembly here, which is normally covered by this aluminium under tray and the plastic lower cover. Obviously the under tray is to protect it from damage. Now the turbo is the lowest part in the engine. This is the sump, which has got the vacuum fittings to pull the drained oil out of the turbo back up into the engine. Have a look at the still photos, because you'll notice the turbo outlet on this car no longer has a separate wastegate and exhaust housing outlet. They actually merge into one area with one single outlet. It's a very, very big flange. We are designing a very complicated splitter to keep them separate, but you'll see in that photo how they are different. But this turbo is part of the exhaust manifold, which is obviously at the bottom of the engine here. But the interesting part, again like the Liberty GT, is the intake here has got a lot of plastic components. The air intake snorkel goes right up inside that inner guard and up into the airbox, which is of course up in the engine bay. Now, car comes on boost really early. It's quite a complicated turbo that Subaru has obviously put a lot of effort into to bring these cars in the way they're designed. From our point of view, we're going to do some more testing on our dyno soon to just see how much back pressure the exhaust system affects the response from the turbo point of view, because you've got to remember, most people put exhaust systems on for one reason and one reason only, is to gain more power. Of secondary benefit is to get that slightly sportier noise. These cars actually have quite a good exhaust note now. The thing that we've got to take into account is if you put a bigger exhaust on a standard tuned car, does it put it in an area where it will risk overboosting or engine damage? Will it have a dramatic effect on fuel consumption? Will it give you the power that you expect? Some of these newer technology engines, when you put an aftermarket exhaust system on it, there is no gain. A classic example of that is a current model Nissan Pulsar SSS with a 1.8 litre direct injection engine, which we do a lot of tuning on. You put an aftermarket exhaust system on that, doesn't make any difference, because the back pressure is not that much of a difference to bring the car on boost earlier. So these are the things that we've got to test on this car, because there's no point designing a fantastic aftermarket exhaust if we're not going to get any gains. So no matter what you're choosing around the world, carefully consider where your parts are coming from and what type of R&D. From our point of view, we pride ourselves in all these things. The information that we're working on will then tie it into a proper factory tune of the factory ECU using, of course, Ecotec software, which is in its final throes of being released at the moment. Similar, interestingly, of these parts is the current model Subaru Forester DIT engine. Now, the body on the Forester is a similar platform, but everything sits up higher. Earlier on today, we had our test exhaust system off the Forester, which we've been designing for some time now, because that car came out last year, and the whole assembly actually bolts up, but it all sits lower, because you've got to remember the body's in a different position relative to the mechanical parts that are bolted to it between a Forester and a WRX. So there you have it, a little bit of information to help you understand the difference between these engines of these different models here in Australia. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Instagram. Hope this info has given you some information that will help you no matter where you are in the world. But for today, on behalf of the team here at MRT Performance, I'm Brent Middleton. Thanks for watching.